Hey, what's up? Pixelflugs here, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about raw files and why I personally shoot raw files and why I think everyone else should be kind of using raw files. Anyway, I'm going to show you some examples in Lightroom, and we're just going to talk a little bit about why raw files are much more superior than JPEGs and their kind of ups and downs. First of all, raw files are massive. Back in the day, that was probably a big issue. Today, not so much. I mean, even though my, say, 5D Mark III raw files are about 33 megabytes each, and a JPEG would be about probably 7, 8 megabytes, it's not that big a deal for me. I mean, I kind of tend to store them on like multi-terabyte hard drives anyway. And, you should probably be shooting your images and then deleting most of them anyway. So storage, not really that big a deal anymore. They do require massive memory cards to kind of, store your images while you're shooting them. But again, not really that massive of a problem anymore. At least not for me. I've got some 64 gigabyte CF cards at my disposal, some massive SD cards if I need to. So again, not really that big a deal. Probably back in the day was more of a hassle, but not so much these days. One of the hassles is probably that you actually need to process your raw files before you can do anything with them. Say if you're shooting something and you just want to kind of quickly upload to Facebook or whatever, not going to be able to do that unless you've got in-camera raw processing. And then again, if you want to upload many images at the same time, it's going to be unfeasible for you to actually go into every single image on the camera and just kind of like turn it into a JPEG, yada yada yada. But the upsides, for me, definitely outweigh the downsides. So let's take a look at Lightroom, where I've prepared a couple of examples. One typical example, one kind of interesting example, and one extreme example. So this would be a typical scenario. I shot this in London probably a month ago or so. And in a typical scenario, on an overcast day, if you expose for your subject, be it a person or a building or whatever, you're probably going to end up having a really white overblown sky, just like I do here. And if I were to shoot a JPEG here, that probably would have been clipped, like all that information would have been lost. And as I can see from my histogram here, I'm actually clipping to total whiteness at the top of the clouds here. And all, most of my histograms on the far right. So I'm really losing a lot of information here. But fret not, we've got raw. So what I would do in this typical scenario, besides the obvious lens correction and stuff like that, I would probably crank down the highlights quite a bit. And, that doesn't really seem to do much here because I don't know why Lightroom doesn't think that that's a proper highlight problem. So, you just gotta probably tinker around a little bit with it. So what I'll probably just do is I'll crank down the exposure until my clouds are all detailed, and probably crank down on the highlights here just to get the proper clouds that I want. And I will crank the shadows back up to get my building back into where I needed it to be. So let's see if I can just give it a little bit of contrast, maybe a little bit of clarity. That looks like poop, but we're gonna fix it up right away. So let's see if I can just kind of tone down the clouds a little bit more. If I go to my color settings, say luminance, I can boost up the oranges a little bit to kind of bring my Big Ben back into where it originally was. And I can take the blues and just kind of play around with them. So I'm going to give it more saturation, a little bit less luminance, something like so. So that already looks quite interesting. So let's see if I can give it a little bit more saturation, probably a little bit more luminance, something like so. probably just kind of saturate it all the way. And let's do the quick obvious lens profile corrections and chromatic aberration correction, shit like that. So yeah, I mean, right away we recovered quite a lot of that cloud detail, and where it was actually clipping before, it's not clipping anymore, which I find really interesting. So if I give it a little bit more contrast, you can kind of see what's going on. So, you can bump up the clarity to kind of give it a more extreme look, if you will. And let's see if I go to my vignetting, I can give it a quick vignette there, and maybe even bump up the exposure just a nudge, like probably half a stop. So right away we see a massive difference in what we had before. So if I flick to the before image and the after image, that's a massive change, you gotta admit. So where all that information was really lost, and with a JPEG you would have struggled a lot to actually make anything useful out of it, or you probably would have had to do a sky replacement, something like that, if you were shooting JPEG. With a RAW file, in a typical scenario, I can get my clouds back up and just have something interesting with them. So there's a lot of possibilities there. Probably, I would personally probably just go into my adjustment brush tool and just kind of brush up the clouds a little bit so that they don't look so moody. But for a quick little demo, how much you can recover, it's absolutely fantastic. So you can sharpen and denoise and stuff like that, and it's brilliant how much detail the raw files actually hold. And that was shot with a 24-105, not the best lens in the world, but it really captures the detail perfectly. So that was the first example. The second example I've got is quite unusual and most people wouldn't think about it, but I'll show you. So my second example is actually a black and white image. I took it with a 12mm Sigma lens. What's interesting about this image is that it's black and white, and there's probably not really that much you can do with it. And say I set my picture style to black and white, yada yada yada, contrast and yellow filter, stuff like that. Interesting image, fairly sharp. What's unusual about that? Now the problem is that, say if I shoot an image like that or whatever, what if I decide that I want to go back to color? With a JPEG, you're screwed. So I come back to Lightroom, I've got black and white. With a RAW file, however, that RAW file just incorporates, and actually let me show you, that's a CR2 file, so that's definitely my RAW file, and that's the same file that I'm using here in Lightroom. The CR2 file, the RAW file, actually doesn't hold kind of any baked information into it. It holds all the color information, all the light information that it can actually gather, and it also kind of says, yeah, I shot this in black and white, so that's kind of my preset, so kind of show that. But if I go to Lightroom and fiddle around with the settings, I can go from black and white back to color. And here I can, make some adjustments to my exposure and everything else, and I can actually get back my colored image. So I think that's something that people don't really maybe think about. But when you shoot black and white, that's still useful if in case you want to go back to color. Because sometimes, say you're in the street or whatever, and you shoot in black and white, as some people do. I usually don't, but I did for this example. And you just forget, that you're in black and white, or you come across something useful or something interesting that you want to shoot in color maybe, but you forget or you don't have the time to actually go into the picture style settings and fiddle around, especially if you've got an entry-level DSLR where the controls are probably buried in the menus, while say on a 5D Mark III or whatever, we've got a dedicated button for like picture styles and stuff like that. So that's another quite good example. And even if you're shooting in black and white, I think that's still relevant if even if you want to keep your image in black and white, because you can, still you can recover the cloud detail and stuff like that. I won't be able to recover any cloud detail here because it was really massively overexposed, but I can still come in and, sharpen the image, say, remove the chromatic aberrations and stuff like that, and I can go in and I can still kind of, fiddle around with the settings. Say, for example, I've got the tree detail there kind of killed by the sky, so I can kind of recover that. You can see how much I'm getting back, and so I can bump up the shadows and the whites or the clarity a little bit, and I can still do all that stuff with black and white. So it's still interesting, and you've got the black and white controls where you can actually say, if I go into the green channel, I can make the leaves white. If I go into the yellow, I can make the grass kind of like dark, and it's an interesting look. So definitely useful. Check that out. And that's about it. So for my third example, I've got an extreme example that I shot in the Birmingham Zoo, in the Cannon Hill Park. If you're local, you know the area. I actually went to a dark room where they keep these kind of like night animals, the ones that live in darkness. Anyway, yeah, and I couldn't see anything with my bare eyes. I could not, and I had these red lights kind of faintly illuminating the environment, and I actually had to kind of wing it. And I had a 24 to 105 f4 image stabilized on my 5D. So I just kind of had to wing it if I wanted to actually see what's going on. So I figured that I'll take a picture because cameras these days I can pretty much see in the dark. So I'll show you what I've got. So that's the image I took. And just to be clear, that's kind of the environment. Like I said, red lights everywhere. And just to be clear, what I saw with my bare eyes was something like that. Actually, probably not even that. Let's see if I can. It was something like that. And I'm not joking at all. It was literally something like that. You could kind of make out the silhouette of the little animal there, but I just couldn't see anything. So I decided to take a picture and hopefully see something. So anyway, but that's just a part of the problem. Once you take that picture, it's all red and it's kind of overblown. And if you were to shoot this in a JPEG, well, tough luck to you. That's pretty much a ruined image. I mean, you could kind of kill the reds, I suppose, but that's not gonna help much because you don't have any bark detail there. It's completely red there. So let me show you an extreme example here, and that was shot with a 1/10 second exposure at f4 105 and ISO 10,000. So I apologize for the noise, which is going to be extreme in this case. I actually seem to have some sharpening there as well. Anyway, so the noise is just going to be extreme here because of the ISO 10,000, but still, you could potentially make a usable image out of that. So let's see what we can do with it. So if I take my white balance selector here and I just kind of click anywhere here, I can, more or less kill some of the reds here, which is good news already. Let's see if I can. That doesn't really do much, so I think I'll just stick to that. So that's killing the reds as much as possible. So my next step would probably be going into the saturation, killing the reds altogether, because I know that I will not need any red detail. And as I do that, check it out. I'm actually recovering a lot of that tree detail there. So I'm desaturating all the reds, and I know that the oranges probably not gonna be there. I mean, we're shooting in a night scene, right? So no orange there. So yeah, I mean, we recovered quite a lot of detail there. So let me get back to the exposure settings, highlights. Probably want to keep that to give me my tree back. Shadows, probably want to bump that up a little bit, just a nudge. Maybe increase the clarity just a touch. Contrast, I think that's about right, really. And we could probably go into my profile corrections. I'll actually remove the distortion correction, chromatic aberrations in case there are any, and just kind of see where we're getting there, which I think is really remarkable. Let's see if I can go to my color settings. If I can take the red hue and make it more orangey, make it kind of less pink, but more orangey, something you would expect outdoors. So there we go. That's the kind of look that we're getting there. So let's add a little bit of sharpening, a little bit of noise reduction, just a touch. I want to keep all the detail. Let's see, I want to keep the detail. Probably the contrast a little bit there. Color frame. That's absolutely fine. So we're going to introduce some of that vignetting back in. And look what we're getting. This is, that's remarkable. To me, even though that picture is still really, really noisy, and it could probably be run through, like an additional denoiser, but I'm not gonna do that because I don't want to lose the fur detail there that much. Although you could potentially go around with a paint brush tool. So say if I do this and just kind of paint around, say the out of focus areas, especially where my blur was. Just gonna paint around. Let's see that. There. All that detail there. And just kind of so if I do that, and let's see if I increase the noise, the denoiser there, I can kind of get a usable image out of that. It's not going to be perfect. It's it's still going to be noisy as hell, but at least now the image is usable, right? Sort of, kind of. If you're going to downscale it a little bit, then I suppose that's a good one. So let's see if I can zoom that in a little bit. There we go. So that looks like a usable image. So let me flick back to what we had before and after. Before and after. Before. Look at the fur. Look at that. And that. All these areas which are completely blown out with red. It's, to me, that's remarkable. Look at the tree bark there. It's absolutely astonishing. These cameras can see in dark, literally. So, if that doesn't convince you to use RAW, I have no idea what would. To me, that's just a hands down. That's use RAW for life kind of sign. Like I said, you do have to fiddle around with it a little bit, but in case you don't, and in case you nailed your exposure in camera, you can just kind of import all the stuff in Lightroom, or say if you've got a Canon camera, you get the Digital Photo Professional software for free, which I've never used, but you get it for free, and you can essentially just kind of import all the images and just kind of like batch export them to JPEGs. Especially, you could probably, I don't know, Lightroom is probably different to that, but in Lightroom at least I can say get all my images in and apply a preset, say for example with denoising or profile corrections or additional vignetting or kind of highlight whatever recovery. I can apply a preset to all of them and just kind of like batch export them, which doesn't take that long, and you can actually set the size of the export images as well, which is very useful. Say you don't want to upload all the full size 18, 20 or 23 or whatever have you megapixel images. You can just kind of set it to say a resolution which is just kind of internet friendly, like a 2K by 2K or whatever, and it'll export into that, and you can just kind of upload them much faster. So there's definitely stuff to be thinking about when shooting RAW, but I think it just kind of is in a way more convenient and you have more control into it. And especially if you're shooting professionally, you don't want to shoot a JPEG like ever at all. I mean, say you're shooting a wedding, the light changes constantly or whatever, or you're shooting in low light or whatever. If you don't nail your exposure, kind of fudged there with a JPEG. With a RAW, you can just kind of like bump it up, denoise it, that's fine. Or if you're overexposed, like say in the Big Man example there, if you're overexposed, you can recover a lot of that detail kind of back. Or, you can recover the colors and change everything. And I think, it does have its place in there. Shooting JPEG? Nah, don't really see why anyone should be shooting a JPEG. That's one reason why. That's one of the main reasons why I actually buy the expensive camera to begin with. I mean, if you wanted to shoot JPEGs, you might as well go and buy a little pocket camera like a Sony like a Canon Cybershot or whatever they're called. They're good enough, or just use your phone. I mean, phones these days, say my Galaxy S4, 13 megapixel, I think it is, whatever. Really good images. I mean, I wouldn't shoot in low light. It's crap. Not as good as my 5D or a 60D, whatever. Not as good, but still, say for daylight, beautiful images, sharp. There's enough detail in them. So yeah, if you're shooting on a DSLR, just totally try RAW. I mean, even if you don't like it, at least try it. It's gonna make your life so much easier. Trust me. I've just illustrated a lot, 3 examples where you would love that kind of control. So yeah, I mean, does that not convince you? If it doesn't, I don't know what will. Anyway, so enough ranting for now. I'm running into a 22.5 minute mark here. I hope you've enjoyed this little video, and I will try to make more videos in the future. It's just that I've got a tight schedule, really. But I will try to make time, and I think it should be a little easier now, because my crunch period is kind of over, at least for now, so it should be fine. So I'll try to make more videos in the future. Maybe try to stick to like 1 video a week. Maybe I can spit out more. Don't know. I'll try. But, if you enjoyed these videos, anyway, I'd appreciate it if you subscribed. Left a comment below if you have any questions. I do, even though I don't upload videos as often as people would love me to, I still go through the comments and I answer all the questions. If you go to my any other video, you will see that if people ask questions, I just answer them. Try my best. Doesn't take me long. It takes me much longer to make these videos, half an hour plus. That this is not the first take, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, so again, if you like these videos, please subscribe. Leave a comment below if you have anything to say. Like the video, share. Spread the word. Spread the love, like this Bob Marley's coffee that I'm drinking here. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next time.